Mahmoud Bawumia. He's here with two of his colleagues, Dr. Anthony Kutu Osei and Kweku Kwarteng, both members of Parliament.
Take it thank you very much. I think Nana Akufo-Addo has made it very clear that his government is going to build a globally competitive economy. We have not really been thinking global, and this is what we need to do. That we have to understand that we are in competition with other countries, and investment moves from country to country, and we have to think global. And so, the Nana Akufo-Addo policy, which he stated, is just basically to build the most people-friendly and the most business-friendly economy in Africa. This is the goal that we are going to try to do, the most people-friendly and the most business-friendly. The tax issue is a major issue, because if you are so, fixated on revenue, you will essentially end up hurting your production. And so if you go back into history, you study the economic history of United States, Germany, England, all of them have used the tax, policy to encourage production. And this is why we are saying that, today you have a situation in Ghana, unbelievable situation, when businesses are out on strike. Businesses who should be selling are out on strike. Why are they out on strike? Because they've been overburdened by taxes. And if you don't take care, you'll be chasing the tax revenue and killing businesses. And when you kill businesses, it means you are causing unemployment. And so if you go back, this is why Nana Akufo-Addo is saying, we need to mobilize financial resources. So why are you going to be imposing VAT on financial services? It doesn't make sense in a country which has got a very large unbanked population, and we want people to bank. We will abolish that, he says. We will abolish import duty on all raw materials, because that has been a policy that will help production. Let the businesses produce. Let them make profit. And when they make profit and employ people, we will get income taxes and we will get corporate taxes. So you don't go ahead to kill the business. No, let them bring in the raw materials. Let them produce. Then you will tax, at the end of the day. And so our approach, and this is why we are going to bring down corporate taxes, we'll put incentives for real estate, tax incentives for the real estate sector, the special import levy on imports, the 1% to 2%, we will abolish it. And this is all to ginger up production and ginger up the economy. And I think that you have a government where you have cutlasses being taxed, condoms being taxed, and even savings. There was a 1% imposition on savings, which was later withdrawn.
On investments,
yes. On investments, which was later. Even to think about it it's
been suspended.
It's been suspended. But even to think about it.
Oh, it's now abolished, is it?
Okay, good. Yeah, but even to think about it, it just questions who are making these policies.
But isn't it just another way?
Another way of raising revenue.
Well, yes,
but when you become desperate, this is what happens, that when you've mismanaged the economy into this hole, then anything sounds great to you because you don't have any option. You see what I mean? And this is the problem, that anything that is taxable, that can feasibly be taxed, they are trying to impose taxes on it, increasing withholding, taxes on withholding, and so on. All of these are hurting. They are hurting the economy. These taxes are hurting. And therefore, you are not going to get the growth. And when you don't get the growth, you will not get the revenue. And when you don't get the revenue, you go back to increasing taxes to get the revenue. And then you are in a cyclical downward spiral. And so they have it wrong. And we will change that particular policy. We will use the tax incentives to grow this economy, and you will get your revenue. We reduced taxes on corporate from 32 to 25, and we increased revenue. But because of this recklessness, they keep thinking that this is going to be the solution: more taxes, more borrowing, more spending, which results in more taxes.
So your solution is take less, but do more.
Do more. As I said, we if you look at the area of roads, the data is clear. MPP built 8 times more roads than the NDC has done. 8 times, with 10 times less money. 10 times less money, we built 8 times more roads.
They'll argue it's more expensive to build a road today.
Yeah, because of their single source procurement methods. Yeah, of course it will be more expensive. We need to have, better procurement. You don't just go, if you look at SADA, for example, 200 million Ghana cedis, and what do you have for it? If you had invested this in dams, you would have built thousands of dams to really grow the agricultural sector. And agric is one of those areas we are going to focus on. Corruption has been a major part of our problem. It's been a major part of our problem.
And we do have to talk about that a bit later, actually, if you don't mind. Because I want us to finish all the economic issues and then move on to the
So
others.
I think that we're going to have to grow this economy, put in the incentives for production, and also to invest. One of the sad things, because infrastructure investment is good for any economy to increase your production and your productivity. One of the sad things we've had in this country is that you've had all these resources. Government has had the most unbelievable amount of resources. All right, 200 billion Ghana cedis over 7 years, compared to 20 billion by the MPP government over 8 years. They've had 200 billion in 7 years. And at the same time, infrastructure investment as a percentage of GDP is falling. It has declined. And when they tried to challenge me the other day and I produced the data, they have run away and haven't come back. The infrastructure investment as a percentage of GDP during the MPP era averaged about 11%, and it's averaging 5%. It has declined. And that doesn't make sense, because if you're going to grow an economy, your infrastructure investment as a proportion of GDP should be increasing, especially when you've become an oil producer. You must increase infrastructure investment. So they are out there touting projects that they have done. But what they are not telling the Ghanaian people is that, in fact, their investment in infrastructure has declined. Unbelievably declined. And we should have been doing, 4 or 5 times as much as we are doing today in infrastructure investment, because you are borrowing and spending only 20% of that borrowing on capital expenditure. So what are you doing with the rest? The IMF managing director has said that they've been doing more consumption than investment. And that is an indictment on the management of the economy, because if you have this type of economy, to grow it, you have to invest. If you are declining investment, decreasing investment, when you have got all these resources, it's inexplicable and unforgivable. And I think the Ghanaian people should hold them accountable. So this mantra that they are doing all these projects is an attempt to hoodwink Ghanaians. With those resources, we could have solved the water problem in this country. We could have solved the energy problem. We could have solved agric in terms of dams and so on. There are many problems that we could have done. And can you imagine if you had just put $1 billion in each region? Right? Just say spend $1 billion. You transform the country. That is just $10 billion of the 37 that they've borrowed, right? They have actually just given it to each region $1 billion. That's 1,000 kilometers of road, for example. If you're doing $1 million per kilometer or whatever, 1,000 kilometers of road in each region is high. So we are going to do a lot in terms of investment, because we think that these guys who are in charge of this economy have not invested in this economy.
Okay.
And so you're going to have to invest in this economy and do the agriculture, focus on the agriculture. We're growing at 0.04%. Zero. Crops are declining. Manufacturing is declining.
Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult for the perspective of that 0.04 to sink in. And to be fair, this is what it actually means. That if you were to take 1% and divide it by 25,
yes,
we have grown by one of those.
That's right.
Yes.
this is agriculture.
This is the mainstay of this economy.
It's an issue. But let's be fair. Let's be fair. The government themselves recognize that it's an issue. They have talked about some policies that they want to put in place, some new innovations they want to put in place.
But they've been in charge for 7 years. I mean, they've had a promise over 7 years. I mean, and how can't you deliver on agriculture? In fact, it doesn't make sense. And this is why I said, for example, if you had to do in the north. I've just come back from the Upper West region, and the whole dry season farming and the need for dams is so huge that I don't understand why we are not investing in these areas. From plains, I mean, the opportunities are there, and it's not a matter of money. We've had the money, we just haven't prioritized it. And that is the difference between an Nana Akufo-Addo government and this government. We will prioritize all of these things and do what we need to do to grow this economy and create jobs.
I want us to round up quickly on the economy. There are a couple of things I would like us to touch on. For example, the depreciating cedi and this microfinance situation. But before we get to those, you said something earlier about the IMF. In fact, you called into question a lot of the design of the program, and specifically when you talked about fiscal consolidation. In fact, you said it's crazy. But I'm curious. Why do you think? What's the motive? Why do you think the IMF would agree to Ghana going into a crazy?
Well, I mean, I think one has to be measured in words. Crazy may not be a good way to talk about it. These are very smart people and all of that, and very concerned, I think, about what they do, and they take what they do seriously. I think that when you look at the fiscal consolidation that is taking place, you've had a reduction in the deficit to about 7.5%, and I think the goal down the road is to get to 6.5% and lower. The MPP left the economy at a deficit of 6.5%. So even after a lot of fiscal consolidation, they haven't even got to where the MPP left the economy off in 2008. But the point I am making is that if you design a fiscal consolidation program with a country that is debt distressed, and you don't anchor that consolidation on a reduction in the debt to GDP ratio, and rather allow the country to continue borrowing. But this is a homegrown program. So I'm not going to blame the IMF. It's the design of this government.
Yes, but why did the IMF accept this as part of their program?
That is in terms of the negotiation. That is what they negotiated. But the government claims credit for the program, and we should say that they convinced the IMF it would work, or so the IMF thought it would work. But my sense is that when you look at the design of the program, the fact that you haven't really had a deliberate policy of bringing down the debt has been increasing under the program. When you have an economy in debt distress, for me, I can't fathom that. If you were someone has been borrowing, an individual, and you want to help them, and you say, okay, you can keep borrowing, but that doesn't make sense to me. I'm humbly suggesting that design is flawed. That if you had anchored the program fiscal consolidation on a reduction also in the debt to GDP ratio, you would have had more of a crowding in of the private sector. Government would have borrowed less, interest rates would have fallen, and you would have had more investment because you would have had a crowding in. The economics of that is straightforward, and so that is why I am critiquing the government. That you cannot just, because we are doing fiscal consolidation for a purpose. It's not just that I've brought the deficit down, but you are doing it so that you will bring interest rates down, you bring inflation down, you grow the economy, you create jobs. That is the purpose. You are not just saying I'm doing fiscal consolidation, I'm bringing the deficit down. So I've brought the deficit down, okay, but my businesses are collapsing, people are out of job, and that sort of thing. That is not a success. Interest rates are skyrocketing. Today, as high as 35%, banks are charging for loans. And they are not even lending. Non-performing loans have gone up to about 15%. right? Banks are not even interested now in lending to businesses. They are rather lending to government because it's the easy way to do. We've gone back to the pre-2000 era in terms of economic and financial management, where banks find it now more easier. During the MPP era, the financial sector reforms really and the fiscal consolidation crowded in the private sector. Banks were chasing people to give them loans. Today they are running away from people. And so we are very, very clear in our mind that this fiscal consolidation that the NDC is talking about, that they have achieved something, and saying that the program is on track. If it's on track and it's not moving, well, it doesn't make sense. It can be on the track, but it's not moving or moving backwards, because you cannot explain that after so many a year and a half of the program, inflation is at 19% and going up. You have growth declining, you have interest rates increasing, and so on. That is not what fiscal consolidation is supposed to achieve. And for me, at the end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So you look at what is the objective, and have you achieved that objective? At this rate, when will we get back to single digit?
But let's not create the impression that IMF is happy. In fact, if we listen to what Dr. Bawumia said, when the deputy managing director has to fly in and tell you that you are spending the borrowing on consumption, you should be worried. Another signal is that a review was to have taken place in February. They've shifted it to April. That should worry us Ghanaians. Are they going to pull out? What's going to happen? And we understand that their concern is this additional Eurobond that the government wants to issue. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But if that happens, please, we're in trouble.
Wow. Okay, we have lots more to talk about. But just to round up in 2 minutes on the economy, other things that have been criticized by the opposition include non-payment of statutory funds, the depreciation of the cedi, this microfinance crisis, and some of the interventions that the government has put in place, like SADA, which you earlier mentioned, and so forth. These things have been heavily criticized by you. But when you think of the reality of the situation, yes, if indeed you are right, that they've mismanaged the economy to the point where they don't have funds to do these things or to manage these problems, like the depreciation of the cedi and the microfinance thing properly, then is there a point of, criticizing that as well? Isn't it a bit like criticizing someone for not being able to swim and then acting surprised when they start drowning?
But when you're hiring them and they tell you they can swim, and then you put them in the water and they cannot swim, you better criticize them. You will have to criticize them because they said they would swim. But they are drowning all of us in debt and taxes. And that is, they said they could swim. But we found out to our detriment that they can't.
It's interesting. I mean, for example, the non-payment of statutory funds is a problem that has been long-standing.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, the government has to make decisions when it comes to how to disperse their funds and put them to the most important uses. Yeah. So, I mean, is this not a bitter pill that we all have to take?
You said statutory. I'm not a lawyer. The law says you must pay. You are collected. It's the timing that you are not meeting. DACF, you're supposed to pay quarter in the lag. Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation on one of your competitors I won't mention, but I heard a minister saying that, we don't have arrears on DACF. We all know that 2014 fourth quarter is in arrears. And you say that you don't have arrears.
Wow. That probably means they won't get paid then.
No, it's going to, he said, we promised in the previous budget to pay the following year. You are breaking the law. Should we allow a government to break the law? If the government does that, we, the poor citizens, what do we do? You see, there's something about governance. I'm sure you come to that. That is also not right. Now people have accepted that it should be the norm. It cannot be. It cannot be. And then we are told that revenue is on track. I mean, you cannot have your cake and eat it.
Yeah, but I think to be fair to the government also, I mean, the IMF one of the criteria because they've also taken this issue. One of the conditions that they've set for the government is to make sure there are no arrears on these statutory funds.
Right.
In fact, if you look at the technical memorandum of understanding, they are even saying that it should be monthly. You shouldn't go beyond
except for DACF.
Except for DACF.
And to add further, for that reason, last year, the government paid one of them ahead of time.
Wow.
Yes, the 2015.
Yeah, we should have had a whole show to congratulate them.
But I think that we have to be fair. But the issue for where you go to health service providers, for example, and so many health service providers are in trouble because they've provided services under the NHIS, and for 8 months they have not been paid. And that is really a problem now. And we are converting this NHIS into a cash and carry system, because if for 8 months you haven't been paid, but you have to pay salaries and so on, you will start rejecting people on NHIS, because when you provide a service, you don't get paid. And that is what is happening, that, a lot of people are not getting paid, and that is a real problem. That this is what Nana Akufo-Addo was talking about, that the NHIS has become a two-tier system where those with the cards have one type of service and those with cash have another type of service. This is not how it was initially designed, and we need to look into that.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to hear the NPP's solution on unemployment from Kweku Kwarteng. We will also speak more to Dr. Bawumia and Dr. Akoto-Osei about other issues, corruption and health, which has been an issue on most networks since the beginning of the year, health infrastructure and this accident at Kintampo and the aftermath of all of that. We'll talk about the 2 laws that Nana Akufo-Addo says he will do something about. This
right to information.
Yes, right to information bill, which, my goodness, has been floating through the system since God was a boy, and then also the new spy bill. We'll find out what exactly the NPP plans to do about these two and whether or not their plans are realistic. There's so much more to learn. Stay with us. We're back after these messages. You're welcome back to the Super Morning Show. It's about 8 minutes to 9. A couple of tweets that I'm interested in. Let me read them quickly. Pardon me. Bad cough today. Okay, this one is from Kwame Kisiedu. He says, are the NPP not Ghanaians? And if they happen to have the best economist as claimed, why not help Ghana? Okay, I think that's what they are suggesting. That's what they want to do, and that's why they're asking you to vote for them. Or maybe you want them to do it without being in power. Well, I'll ask Dr. Bawumia for an answer for you. This one says, this is from Nana Ujiri. Thanks to Dr. Bawumia and his learned team, they've displayed that brains develop a nation, not resources. Well, I think some resources would help.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. So let's very quickly whistle through a few of the other issues that are outstanding. Corruption. Now, the NPP has made a lot of noise about the Smarties bus branding.
Do you do the employment?
Oh yes. Pardon me. Yes, that too. Let's actually start with that unemployment. Now, during the break, Kweku Kwarteng was sharing some views on how the unemployment problem would be solved if the NPP were to win power in November. So why don't you elaborate, please?
Sure. That point was made by Nana in his delivery, and Alhaji Bawumia has canvassed that solution this morning already. You see, when a government chooses to overtax its citizens and businesses, the effect is that economic activities shrink, and then opportunities to employ people would go with the shrinking. And in our case, the situation is made worse by the fact that government has additionally been competing with the private sector on the domestic money market. That is to say, government is lending on the domestic market and offering higher rates than businesses can offer. All that would conspire to create a situation where the economy would not grow. And it is not for nothing that the economy, which grew by 9% in 2008, which grew by 14% in 2011 when oil came on stream, is now growing at a rate of less than 4%. It is a direct result of government's overtaxation and government's competition with the private sector on the domestic market. So once we free the private sector to expand economic activity, that would come with job creation. And then on the manpower side, Nanado did make the point that we need to review our manpower training strategies. The skill training that you want to offer to your youth will have to be reviewed. I mean, we started the National Youth Employment Program in 2007. That was turned into GDAM and now YEA, and has been turned into a vehicle for siphoning money from public funds into private pockets. Corruption. What an NPP administration will do is to review that to ensure that while the private sector is giving room to expand economic activity and create jobs, people would be equipped with the skill to take up these job opportunities. I mean, in summary, that is our strategies for providing employment, and I'm confident it's a very workable strategy.
Very well. Okay, so let's go into corruption next. Dr. Bawumia, the Smarties deal has been criticized by so many, and for obvious reasons. The government themselves put together a report that determined that this company was overpaid for this deal. Now, the criticism has been from the NPP that why not prosecute those who were behind this thing? Now, I spoke to the General Secretary of the NDC after the President's State of the Nation address, and I asked him the same question. His answer was that, look, we're a poor country. People have taken our money without, illegally taken our money, unlawfully taken our money. We can get it back. Let's get it back. But why go through the extra expense of prosecution when we're on a shoestring budget? Is that not a fair question?
It's unbelievable. I mean, you mean nobody should be prosecuted? Once they've stolen money, you should just try to get it back. Well, of course, that's the strategy they've employed for Bawumia. Also, maybe that he should pay it back. I don't know.
Yes. He was asking for 3 years to pay back.
Yeah, he's now given us a timetable for actually. It is unbelievable. If you are a nation of laws, you've got to enforce the laws. I mean, the procurement process. As we all know, this Smarties contract went for procurement approval after it had already been awarded. The whole process of the award of that contract really stinks, and there have to have been people who saw this thing through. Of course, the minister resigned, but she could not have had been the only person who authorized this transaction to take place. There are people, I mean, in complete violation of our laws. And so even if you're going to get the money back, you will need to set some standards so that there is a deterrence for people to do this. So now people know that if you steal money, once you are caught, well, they'll just give you some time to pay back. Now, without that deterrence, then of course everybody is going to try to steal as much as possible. So I think that it's very sad, that approach, and I think this is really why Nana Akufo-Addo made the point that fight against corruption in this sense is really a sham. It's really a sham.
But surely you have to give them some credit. They signed this deal with the company, and then in response to questions raised, they went ahead and took some money back.
This contract was paid with oil revenue, right? It came out of the oil account. Our oil money, was being used to pay for Smarties rebranding. To access that oil account, people higher up ought to know, because the oil is designated for certain specific purposes. So this whole thing, I don't really think we've gotten to the bottom of it, quite frankly. And I think that there should have been much more, because that whole deterrence is not there.
You're suggesting there's someone higher up than the ministers who
I don't know, but I'm
would have...
just saying that it doesn't make sense the way. Who can access the oil account to pay for this, and all of that. It doesn't make sense that this contract was issued and even worked on before procurement approval was sought. What was the emergency if to do this? It doesn't make sense. So I think we have much better things to spend our oil revenue. I was in the Upper West recently. As you all know, we went to Percy MA Primary School.
Oh yes, the kids who didn't have furniture.
Who didn't have furniture.
Absolutely.
And this money that was used for brass branding could have solved the furniture problems of many schools.
Let's be honest, Dr. Bawumia. That trip up there to that school, was it not just a little bit of smart politicking? You noticed a problem had been announced, and then you thought, let me just turn up and show that I care.
Perhaps let me answer it for him.
And it worked.
Well, you know why? You know why? If smart politicking can get kids to have tables, so be it.
The whole issue that you are looking at children without desks. When I saw the story, honestly, initially, when I heard the story, I could not believe it. I really could not believe it, because if you are looking to be in charge of the economy of this country, inshallah, as vice president and head of the economic management team, one needs to be very familiar with the ground. And I'm doing a lot of these trips to really be able to assess for myself, what is the situation, what are the needs? And so when you go to an area and they tell you that kids are lying on the floor and studying, you ought to go and see it for yourself.
But why are you surprised? The schools under trees and all of these things have been happening during Kufuor's time.
But as I said, once that story broke up, of course, there have been schools under trees and so on, and you go to see them. I saw a few schools under trees. I've seen a few schools under trees on my trips, and I've stopped to see them as well.
They've been around for ages.
Once this issue came up, I had to go and see it for myself. I saw it as a duty to go and see it for myself and see these poor suffering kids and do the little that I could to help. And that is exactly what happened. Of course, in the process, the government got very embarrassed.
So you should visit more schools.
Yes, I am getting,
Maybe
I'm getting a lot of invitations by schools because they think that maybe if I come there, the government would actually provide them with the things they are looking for. So we're going to do that. But interestingly, this wasn't even the only school that I have helped in this. I visited Nope in Amenfi West, Nope Primary School, and I went there and they had exactly the same situation. So I left I contributed something to them to get chairs and tables. That wasn't reported, but this was when I went to the Amenfi West district. So this isn't the first time, and I think that if you were just politicking, then I would have made a big deal about the Nope donation, but I didn't.
Well, they're hearing about it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if one would have done that. But I think that we've got to expose the true state of the economy to people. Because this was the same day that the president was giving his State of the Nation address and painting a very different picture from the true picture on the ground. And therefore, we had to let people see what the true picture. And so corruption takes away these opportunities for our kids, whether in schools or in hospitals or on farms. The corruption, whether it's in SADA or JIDA or Smarties or Car Power, is a major problem for our people.
So your government will prosecute?
Well, I think Nana Akufo-Addo has said that one of the things that he's going to do is to establish an independent prosecutor's office with a legislative mandate to deal with corruption. Because, for example, the Attorney General has recommended that prosecution should take place. Now, she is the person responsible for prosecution. So why are you recommending? Who else do you want to tell you to prosecute? It's your responsibility. What is the purpose of that
check with your supervisor.
Yeah, your supervisor. It shouldn't be. This is why Nana Akufo-Addo is saying that we need an office an independent prosecutor, so that you are doing it and don't have to check with your supervisor to see whether this person is, is prosecutable. If it was obviously an MPP person, I'm sure they wouldn't have even checked. They would have gone. But because these are NDC people who have been involved in this, I'm sure they are looking to see if they should go ahead.
Yes,
but it's not for them to decide. That's what the law says.
Okay, now let's segue into a bit of education, since we were just talking about schools. The other things you've criticized that the president has done: free school uniforms, school feeding, free shoes, sandals. Surely, for those who have benefited from these things, for those who have come into the gallery and been introduced to the nation as beneficiaries of some of these things, to them this is great, and they won't be happy to hear you criticize some of these life-changing policies that the government has put in place.
Well, I don't know how life-changing they are, but I'm sure for any kid or the 10,000 kids, I think they were supposed to give 10,000 kids school sandals for school and some school uniforms and so on. I mean, these are really at the margin and not really fundamental, things that will change education. 10,000 out of, hundreds of thousands of kids. What impact are you going to make with that? Kids want to be able to go to school. They want to be fed. They said the school feeding was going to be extended to every school. It hasn't. They want to be able to have access to education in terms of being able to. Parents need to be able to afford the fees to go in there to study and so on. So I think that in terms of education, definitely we should be doing more. I think the president is saying that they are doing 200 senior secondary schools. So far they've completed 4.
And they haven't changed the deadline.
Yeah, they have not changed the deadline. So we have 7 months to commission 196. So we will hold them to it and move on.
Now, regarding things like sandals, uniforms, and so forth, the Minister for Education has a theory that, especially for kids who are going into school a bit too late, they come into school and there's that stigma, the fact that they are taller than everyone, they are wearing different clothes and all that, and it's likely to lead to a lot of people dropping out because it's better for them to just go and help their dads with the fish or whatever than come to school and look odd, because they don't have the uniform and stand out and be, bullied and so forth. So in that regard, is this not a positive intervention that is going to help people, increase attendance and hopefully increase the education coverage across the nation?
I don't see that nexus at all. I think we've had people who have been attending school, even if they have been over age, for years. I think school uniforms are great if everybody can have them and all of that. But you need motivated teachers to be able to bring quality education. And if you cancel teacher training allowances, you cannot maybe get the quality. A lot of people will not be able to go into teacher training, even though they are very smart. You will not be able to get the quality of teachers that you have. If teachers are working for 2 years and you only pay them 3 months in arrears, there is no motivation. A lot because of the government's financial difficulties. They are even sending BNI to schools to examine certificates of teachers. BNI into schools to exam. I mean, who employed them in the first place? On what basis were they employed? Why do you now have to almost criminalize hard-working teachers for working? In the meantime, you are paying them something, and then you are saying that you are not be able to pay them all the arrears because you are checking the certificates. It doesn't make sense, and you are really scamming them in a way by refusing to pay for services done. and you are using the certificate issue really as an excuse to delay. They're really not. It's not been fair. So I think that if you really need quality education, you need really motivated teachers, and we need and the right inputs. Yeah.
All right, couple of minutes on Dumso, and I have just one question here.
Yeah.
Yes, the president says that they have done the fastest mobilization of emergency power in the history of Ghana.
Really?
4 years.
That's what he
Fastest in 4 years. They
That's
took
what he
4
said.
years to mobilize,
Yes.
and that is
However-
supposed to be fast.
However,
That is really scary.
Well,
I mean,
Dr.
if that
Bawumia,
is
the
their
question is
sense
still
of
to
fast.
come.
Okay.
The question is I'm just wondering, whatever you may say about how he described what they've done, the fact is that we now have a better power situation than before. And members of your own party have admitted that, yes, they've done something.
And how long is that sustainable?
Well, they've solved the problem. They said they would by the end of the
solved the
year.
problem
Emergency
because they
power.
don't understand the problem.
We've always said, and this thing, when this government came in, there was no Dumso. They inherited an economy without Dumso.
But we've had it
And
periodically
then,
throughout the years.
But they
For 4 years.
inherited an economy without Dumso. Dumso really started in earnest 4 years ago. So they, through their own financial mismanagement, that compromised the balance sheets of VRA and others, ECG and so on, caused Dumso. We always told you Dumso was a financial problem, and they denied it. But once you then bring in resources to bring in emergency power at very, very high cost, again, car power and so on, these are sole sourcing procurement that took place, and the cost of those things is very high. So when you cause a problem and you've given me a temporary solution to it, and you expect me to give you credit, you must be joking. You have caused the problem. You should be solving it. I'm not going to. You've dug a hole and filled it and say I should praise you. No, you should have done much better. That's this temporary solution is not. Listen, we have lost so much as an economy over the last 4 years because of Dumso. People have died because of Dumso. You've lost in 4 years about $3 billion in this economy. So much unemployment, and it really frustrates me when this government wants to take credit for providing this temporary solution. They haven't really provided a permanent solution. It's a temporary solution, and they are not understanding the cost to this economy of Dumso. 2% of GDP a year. The growth, that decline that we are seeing, the job losses that we are seeing, a lot of businesses have had to fold up. This is a major cost to this economy, and it's because of Dumso. And Dumso, it has been caused by the financial and economic mismanagement of this government. And so we shouldn't be giving them credit for solving a problem that they have solved. Fastest, 4 years, fastest mobilization.
Well,
I mean,
Dr. Bawumia,
then
do you know what I've never heard?
Yes.
I have never heard the NPP's permanent solution to Dumso.
See,
Policy environment.
Nana Akufo-Addo was talking about the whole power issue and what we ought to be doing. We had obviously started, and Dr. Akoto said at Ministry of Finance, negotiated quite a lot. We had started a lot of projects in thinking about the way forward. We obviously would not have mismanaged the economy to the extent that we couldn't get VRA to import crude and all of that. And you need to get the private sector involved in power production and look at the whole generation, distribution, and transmission links to get optimal power production. And I think that you had a lot. If the climate is good, you'll get the investment coming in for us to deal with the problem. So we would look to bringing in generating capacity from various sources, but mainly the private sector is going to lead the way in this. And I think that if the pricing is competitive, you will get a lot more investment.
Competitive pricing means higher tariffs, does it not?
You need more efficiency. It doesn't necessarily mean higher tariffs. If you go and impose taxes on the automatic adjustment formula, and you impose taxes, of course the tariffs will be high. I mean, we are seeing high imposition of taxes on because of the government's mismanagement. So I think that you will need to have a combination of getting more efficiency from the distribution and the transmission and generation sectors, as well as more investment. And in many countries, you have to be planning ahead. The lessons that we've learned, that you've got to get, because the economy is growing, power needs are also going to grow. And so if you stay put, you will have a problem.
But one of the things that's not being said, most people don't understand, is that these so-called additional generation that the president was talking about, TICO, KTTP, Asogli, they were started during the MPP time.
Absolutely.
Because you need 2 or 3 year lag to bring generation capacity.
Right.
Bui Dam was started in the MPP time. So, except for Ameri and as it were, Kapa, most of them started during the MPP time, and that's the planning. But they suspended most of them for obvious reasons, and it took them 7 years, as I said, to solve it. If they had continued, KTPP was started during that time, Senate, this is all plans that the energy sector put in place at that time. So it's not that they came and started those things. And those are yielding fruits now, except for Car Power and Ameri. And just on a lighter note, it is not surprising that the Prime Minister of Turkey was here because of Car Power. It's not a coincidence.
But Kojo, if I can add this bit, increasingly, US domestic units not getting power because of intermittent interruptions, then government say, well, that one is a local problem, as though distribution is not part of the energy sector. I think government has to review its position on this, so that we would make sufficient investments in distribution, so that where we even do not have this nationwide power rationing, at least in our localities, we can enjoy uninterrupted power supply. After all, what is the point if there's no power rationing, but somehow your transformer isn't working, and so you do not have power? It still comes back to the same problem, and government must begin to own the distribution issues as well.
And of course was concerned, and we ended up striking oil. Initially, we were told it was just cooking oil that we had found, and not real oil. We put in place the West African gas pipeline, the Bui Dam. We started work on the 126 megawatts VRA Thermal 1 plant, the 50 megawatts Thermal 2 plant, the 220 megawatts Pone Thermal plant as well as the 126 megawatt Osono plant. The Abuaze plant, that Takoradi 1, was also initiated by the MPP, and so was the 220 megawatt Asogli plant, which was completed towards the end of the MPP administration. So there were a lot of projects as far as energy was concerned. They should have continued when they came in with these things, and we shouldn't have had these problems.
When you give these...
Be, inshallah, the next president of the Republic of Ghana. That is the bottom line, and there's no other thinking beyond that.
Well, a smart party will plan for all eventualities. So,
we are only focused on the 2016 election,
and you are not losing that.
I would like to say that there are only 250 days to go to the election.
Yes,
and Ghanaians, really, we should get up and be ready for that change. 250 days to change. 250 days to the restoration of teacher training allowances, nursing training allowances, 250 days to the abolishment of some of these onerous taxes on our businesses, 250 days to say bye-bye to this massive corruption, 250 days that are left to begin creating the most business-friendly and the most people-friendly economy on the face of Africa. We are going to transform this country. We believe that we can do so. I believe that we can do so under the leadership of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo.